Hello guys, welcome back to another video of our React tutorial series. In our last video, we talked about navigating from pages to pages programmatically and using the link component. We talked about navigating from login page to a profile page and to a sign up page. So in this video is going to be a continuation of that, and in this video we're going to see how we can pass data from one page to another, right? And we're going to do that by first of all adding validation to our sign up page. After validation, we're going to see how we can get those data validated and passed to the profile page using routing, using React router. So let's get back to work. So first we're going to go to our sign up page and start from there. From our sign up page, we're going to create two states. If you don't know about states, refer back to our previous video. We talked about states, and we're going to use the useState hook. So now we're going to declare states that will manage our input, our form input. Here I'm going to say const form data, set form data is equal to use state. All right, don't forget to always import your use state from React, just like I did here. I have my use state imported from React, and the form data is going to have a default value, which is going to be an object. It's going to have a name property, of course by default is empty. Email property by default is also empty, and a password property. So these properties are going to hold our input values. We have the input for name, have the input for email, and we have the input for password. So after doing that, what's the next thing we're going to do? Let's add a comment here. Create state to handle inputs, to handle form input. So the next thing we're going to do is to create a state to handle our error. So we're going to handle some errors in case there is a validation error. So create state to handle error. Here I'm just going to say const error set error is equal to use state, and of course my error is just going to be an empty object. Right, after that, the next thing we're going to do is to create a validate function, which is going to be we're going to use for validation, right? But before that, we'll head over to create few handlers. We're going to create handler for input change, and we're going to create handler for sign up, right? So first of all, let's create handler for input state. So let's say create input handler, and this is just going to be a function, right? I'm going to create a function and I'm going to name it input handler, right? So what this function is going to do for us is to always update our input state, the input state we created here. So whenever there is a change, whenever there is an event triggered in the input, the input handler is going to help us save whatever value is returned to our state. So what do we do here? The first thing we're going to do here is to set the form data, right? Because it is the form data that sets the state. So set form data, we already have it here, right? So set form data, and what are we setting? We are going to set the name, the email, and the password. But how do we know which of the input is being triggered, right? So we'll do that by saying return everything in form data, right, using the spread operator. And we're going to say e.target .id. So we're going to get the ID of the input that is being triggered. It's going to be the key, and its value is going to be e.target.value. So that means we're going to make sure our inputs have the actual ID. So if I trigger a change on this input, it's going to create a new object property key and value in my state, which is going to be the key of the property is going to be name, and the value is going to be whatever value inputted in this input. So that is what we're doing here. We're saying return everything in the input, create a new property, which is going to be the key is going to be the ID of the input, and the value is going to be so this is supposed to be E, not error. Please correct this. And we're going to accept E here as a property, right? So with this helps us to create a new state whenever there is a change in the input. And of course, we're going to make sure there is no error. We're going to reset our error. We're going to say set error, and the set error is going to have everything in the error state, right? And then we're going to say e.target.value, e.target.id, right? e.target.id should not have any error, should have an empty error, right? So this is just resetting our error. So whenever we type, if there was previous error, clear the error and start again. This is what the input handler is doing for us. So if I save this, we are still good. And the next thing we're going to do is to call this input handler in our form. So whenever we change the value of our input, we call this input handler. And how do we do that? We do that by going to the input, and create an onChange event listener. So we're going to say input, we're going to say onChange, right? OnChange, we're just going to call our input handler, right? That is that for that. And of course, we're going to give a value to our input. The value is going to be the form data.name. So whatever the name is going to be the the name is ID. So whatever we're saving is going to be a name property. So this is going to be form data.name, right? We'll do the same thing. I'll just copy this and paste, and we'll do the same thing for the email. Right, so this is going to be the ID is email, so this is going to be form data.email, and we'll do the same thing for password. The ID is password, so this is going to be form data.password. So we've passed our event handler to our event. So the next thing we're going to do is to create a form input, a form handler, a form. So the next thing we're going to do is to create a form handler. The form handler is going to be appended to our form, because it is our form that will help us to submit. It is our form that will carry out the submission. So we're going to create a form handler as our next handler. So we're going to add it here. We're going to say create form submission handler. So let's call it form submission handler. Form submission handler. So it's just going to be a function as usual. We're going to say function, which is going to be, I'm going to call it sign up handler. In this sign up handler, first of all, we're going to prevent default behavior of the browser. So we're going to say e.prevent default to make sure whenever we submit our form, our page does not reload, right? So after this, the next thing we're going to do is to validate our input. So I'm going to say validate our form or input, right? You can say validate our form or validate our input, whatever way you want. So since the next thing we're going to do is to validate our input, let us create a validation handler, a validation function that will help us to validate our input. So we could just create a function, say const, and we're going to call it validate, which is going to be an arrow function. So what is this validate going to do for us? So first of all, we're going to validate all the inputs, make sure the inputs are correct. You inputted the actual email, inputted actual name, and your password is at least strong enough. So first we're going to declare a variable called new error. We're going to say const new error, which is going to be an empty object. After that, we're going to say if form data.name is not your, so basically you're going to check if you did not add any name, if the user did not input any name while submitting. So this is just going to be if not form data, so sorry, this is supposed to be form, if not form data dot name dot stream, right? So if not form data dot name dot stream, we're just going to say new error dot name should be equal to a string, say name is required, right? So if there is no name, save your new error to be name is required. So this is going to create a new object in our new error, which is going to, with a name property, say name is required, right? We will also do the same thing for email, but for email we're going to say if not form data dot email dot stream, right? If not form data dot email dot stream, what are we going to do? We're going to say new error, we're going to say new error dot email is going to be equal to email is required, right? Is required. And after that, if the user actually inputted an email, we need to check if it is the right format of email, if the format of the email the user inputted is correct, right? So we're saying else if, we're going to have some regular expressions here that will check if the email the user is inputting is actually the best or is actually the right format of email, right? We're going to have some regular expressions. I'm just going to copy it and paste it so you can always have access to it. I'm going to add it to the description and you can always copy, right? So we're going to have this regular expression. We're going to say if not this, right? And if not this, and we're saying dot test. What are we testing? We're testing the form data dot email, right? We're having a red screen. Okay, this is coming from here. So we're basically saying if the format of the email is not an actual email format, if it's not an actual email format, do something. What are we supposed to do here? We're supposed to set our new error to be email is invalid. So we're going to say new error should be equal to, so this is going to be, remember from here we said, so let me just copy this so we don't run into errors. Say new error dot email is equal to email is not valid. Email is not valid. So after this, what is the next thing we're going to check, right? We've checked for the name, we've checked for the email, and the next thing we're going to check is for the password. So how do we do that? We say if not form data dot password, if not form data dot password, so it means you're checking if the user have not inputted any password. First we're going to say our new error dot password is going to be password is required, right? Password is required. Else if the length of the password, we're going to check the length of the password and we're going to give 6 as the minimum, right? Minimum password you can give, and say else if form data dot password dot length is less than 6, we're going to say, let's just copy this and we're going to say our new error dot password is going to be password must be at least 6 characters. So this is going to be password must be at least 6 characters. So this is it, guys, for the validate function, and at the end of the day we're just going to return the new error for this function. This function is just going to return the new error. So the next thing we're going to do is to call, here we're supposed to validate our input, we're just going to call our error. We're going to initialize the error and we're going to use it to validate our inputs. We're going to say const, we're going to create a variable called validation errors, which is going to be our validate function, right? We're just initializing our validate function. So the next thing we're going to do is to check for the validation error. We're saying if object.key, and what are the keys we're looking at for? We're looking at for the keys of the validation error, right? Length is greater than 0. It means there is an error in the validation. There is an error in the validation. What are we going to do here? We're just going to set our error state. Remember, we have an error state here. So we're just going to set this error state to whatever error is returned in the validation error function. So we're just going to set this state to validation error. We're going to set this state to validation error. Else, if there is no error, remember what we did in our last tutorial. We're just going to say we already initialized our navigate. So I'm going to copy this to the top here so we don't run into error, and I'm going to take out this sign up handler. So what we're going to do next is, if there is no error, just navigate to my profile, right? If there is no error, navigate to my profile. This is not what we want to achieve. What we want to achieve in this video is to see how we can pass in all this data to the new profile page, right? We'll go into that in a bit, but then let's go and call our sign up handler in our form element. Right, in our form, we're going to create on submit action. In our form, we're going to have on submit action. On submit is just going to have a sign up handler. That is it, guys, and I'm hoping everything should be working. If we go back to our button, we deleted the sign up handler function, so it's no longer needed here. Sign up handler is no longer needed here. We're going to take out the on click event. So guys, let's try to run our application and see what we have. I'm going to do npm run dev, and I'm going to hit enter. It's going to run my application in port 5173. If I open it up in my browser, this is what we have, right? Because in our app.jsx, our landing page, our first page is the login page. So if we head over to the sign up page, let's just open our developer tool to make sure we can track any unforeseen errors. Right, everything is good and we're good. So we have this. If we check out this, let's try to submit the form without adding any of this data. So if you click on this, nothing happens. That is because in our inputs, in our error handler, we have not displayed our error messages, right? So look at this from here, where we say if there is an error, we're only setting the error state. We are not saying anything. Okay, for example, let's see if we can log out an error. There is an error. So if I log out this and we'll go back, right, and I click on this button, it's going to log out. There is an error. So one more thing is left for us. We're going to see how we can display this error in our JSX. So first, we're going to create an error div for the inputs. For the name input, we're going to create an error div for the email input, and we're going to create an error div for the password input in case any of these inputs results to an error. So how do we do that? We go to our input. Right, after our input tag, we're just going to create error, but then we're going to use the ternary operator. We're going to say if error dot password, if error dot name, because we said here if there is an error in the name, we said that if there is an error in the name in our validate function, we say if there is error in the name, we should set new error dot name. So we're checking for the name property of the error. If error dot name, right? So we're using the short circuit rather. We're just going to have a div that is going to hold our error message. This div is going to hold our error message, and the error message is going to be error.name, right? We're going to do the same thing for the email and for the password. For the email and for the password. So this is going to be if error.email display error.email, and this is going to be if error.password display error.password. If I save this and we'll go back to our page, we're going to have an error. We have name is required, email is required, and password is required. Let me refresh this, and we still have it. So if I click on this button, the 3 errors display. But let's add little styles to this error. So let's create a style for our errors. We're going to name it error style. So we're going to create the style property for our error style. We're going to say const error style should just be equal to, we're just going to give it a color of red so it will represent error. We're going to give it a font size. Or what font size should we give it to? We're just going to say 0.8 REM, 0.8 REM, and we're going to give it a margin top. We're going to give it a margin top. We're going to give it a margin top of 0.25 REM. So this is it for the error style. So we're just going to add the error styles to our div, to our error div. We're going to say style, which is going to be equal to error style. We're going to do the same thing for the password. I'm just going to copy what we have here, paste for the password, and paste for the name. Right, this should give a little styling to it. So if we go back, we already now have it here. So let's see what happens if there is no error. Let's say I'm putting my name, I'm putting my email, and I'm putting password 1 2 3 4 5 6. Right, if I provide all this data and I click on, it takes me to my profile page, right? But then my name is Paul Aminibo, my email is aminibopol@gmail.com, and what we are seeing here is John Doe, and what we're seeing here is John.doe at example.com. So that brings us to the next thing we're going to talk about, which is to send this data from one page to another. So how do we do that? Let's go over to our sign up handler. Here it takes 2 parameters. The first parameter is the path you want to navigate to, and the second parameter is the data you want to send to the page you want to navigate to. So how do we pass in the data to our state? Here we could just say, if we go back to our state, we have our form data is holding our name property, email property, and password property. Let's just make sure that is correct. Let's go back to here. Instead of navigating to our new page, let's log out our form data. Let's say console.log form data, right? If we do this and save, if we go back, let's go back to sign up page and refresh, right? If I come here, pass in aminibopol, pass in my aminibopol@gmail.com, and I pass in my password 56, right? If I click on sign up, we are having the data here. So this is the data we're going to pass in to the new page. And how do we do that? We do that by passing the second parameter of our navigate. We do that by saying, oh, sorry, not there. Yeah, that by saying, passing the state property. The state property is going to hold whatever data we want to pass. We have the state property, we have the path name, we have the parameters, and some other properties that comes with the useNavigate. Our form data, right? State property is just going to be our form data. So if we do this, we'll be able to pass in our data from this page to another, right? So if I save this, go back to our page to refresh, right? Go back to our page to refresh. We're going to pass in my name, pass in my email, and I pass in my password, right? if I do this and I say sign up, it takes us to the new page. It is not still showing. That brings us to the last thing we're going to do for this video, how to get access to the data that is passed to a new page. How do we do that? We'll first of all go back to our new page, which is a profile page, and we're going to import few properties from React Router DOM, which is going to help us have access to the data that is passed to this page. And what are they? We're going to first import. We're going to import useLocation. useLocation will help us to useLocation from React Router DOM, right? And we're going to initialize our useLocation. We're going to say from here, we're going to say const location should be equal to useLocation, right? We're going to initialize our useLocation, which means whatever data we are passing to our new page will be held in this useLocation. And how do we make sure that is correct? Let's just go over here to log out what we have in our location. So we're going to say console.log location. If I save this and go back to our page, we're going to see in our location property, we have in our location data, we have the hash property, we have the key property, we have the path name. The path name is the profile, and we have the search parameter, and of course we have the state which we sent from our sign up page, which is holding our email, our name, and our password. So how do we display that in our JSX? We're just going to save this path name, this location, to our state, and we're going to feed from our state. So how do we do that? We're going to have a state, we're going to call it user data, say const user data and set user data, right? This is going to be equal to useState. Always import useState from React. I just did, and the default value is going to be, I'm going to say if there is location.state. So let's just make sure there is location.state. You're sending data from the old page. If location.state, right, let the default value of the user be location.state. Else, let the user data be default value is null, right? If we save this and we go back to, let's now go back to log out our user data instead of logging out our location, we have this, right? So we have this as our user data, the email, the name, and the password, which means we can just come over here to replace the John Doe with whatever data we are passing. So this is now going to be user data dot name. This is going to be user data dot email. If we save this, we now have aminibopol, and we have aminibopol@gmail.com as the data. So that is it, guys. If there is any question, drop in the comment section. Don't forget to like, don't forget to share, don't forget to subscribe. See you guys in the next video. Bye.